Hey, everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 89 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show.
You know, you could usually when I
So for me, in the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, right now there are only two people that I have not been able to get on the show yet that I really wanted to because they just fit the goal of the show. For you guys that don't know, the goal of this show is to learn jiu-jitsu more efficiently and effectively. And those two people are John Thomas and Shawn Williams. Well, today we get to narrow that down to just one, and we get to spend a little over an hour with Shawn Williams. There are a few podcasts that I think you could reference if you were looking for more backstory on who Shawn is. For more linear, this is how his life went, this is why he started jiu-jitsu, and those things. We do not focus on that at all because I thought it has already been done with Shawn. The Jiu-Jitsu podcast just recently released a very good episode with Shawn, and they get into a lot more backstory. And Ryan Ford, who has been on the show, so is Chewy. Ryan Ford in the Grappling Central podcast that is now the BJJ Fanatics podcast, if you guys didn't know. He has 2 episodes, I think, maybe even 3 with Shawn. But again, you get a lot more backstory. This is was not the goal with Shawn this time. I really wanted to just for an hour ask him questions about training and training method, how to watch tape, how to get good at jiu-jitsu. And Shawn just, of course, absolutely delivers on this episode. I tried to stump him the best I could, and he didn't flinch at a single question that I asked. Just went right into each answer, and the answers are excellent. I really think that this is something that you guys will benefit from. I always speak so highly of Shawn on the show because it's somebody that I've gotten to meet, that has stuff online that talks not just about technique. There aren't a ton of people that do that. Most people want to just show you technique. And so the cool thing about him is that he is excellent at showing technique and having excellent techniques, but he's also very, very good at how to apply them and how to train them and how to master them and perfect them. And that's what we spend this entire hour on. I know you guys are going to love this one if you are a fan of the show. There's a point where I have to run off camera for, it took like 10 seconds, but when we actually show the podcast, it'll only be 1 second. I cut out the point where I'm off camera, but I had to let my dog in the house because I'm a horrible dog parent. Whatever, dog dad. I'm a horrible dog dad. And so we just, I actually kept that in because we reference it a few times and make some fun with it. So I decided to not cut that out except for the delay where I'm actually out of the room running around like a maniac letting in my dog. But before we get into the episode, don't forget that the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show is sponsored by SimplifyingJiu-Jitsu.com. Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu is your one-stop shop to learn jiu-jitsu more efficiently and effectively. And if you guys want a little more information, you want to join the newsletter, you can sign up for our free ebook at SimplifyingJiu-Jitsu.com called Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu, where we take the 5 essential positions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and we break them down. The 5 essential positions are where you spend about 90+% of your time doing jiu-jitsu. And we break them down on how to train these positions and in what order to train the positions. And what is cool is I actually reference rolling without strength in that book. And so that is something I got from Shawn, and that's actually where we're going to start the top of the episode with. We're going to start the podcast with. And so without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, Shawn, how are you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing great, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you for being on. Actually, when I started my podcast, I think you were one of the first messages that I sent out that wasn't my coach or someone like that. You were one of the first. And to go to our Instagram conversation, I thought that would be a great place to start. I had sent you a message saying, "Hey, will you come on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show?" And you responded about 6 months later and said, "I think I need a show called the I Suck at Instagram show because I missed this." But we got it together and we got you on.
Yeah, nice, man. No, it's true. I'm horrible at like responding on social media. I actually have a really I'm about family first, and then everything else comes like jiu-jitsu. It's family jiu-jitsu, but my technological savviness is pretty bad. I don't know if this word existed before I made it, but I used, when Twitter was big, I'm dating myself. When Twitter was like really big, I was like, I'm Twilliterate because I have no idea how to use this thing. So yeah, that's just sort of how it is. But yeah, I suck at social media for sure. I'm always trying to get better.
I get it. All right. So normally we start the podcast pretty relaxed, and we build, right? And it's linear, the progression. Today, I thought we might change it up, start big, start with a really more philosophical jiu-jitsu question, and that will be our first topic to kind of start on. But I've referenced on the podcast probably more than 5 times the first seminar that I ever did with you when Kyle had you in. And I was a purple belt at the time. The reason I reference it constantly is I remember the techniques that you showed. I remember the omoplata stuff that you showed. It was really good. I did a private with you. It was really good. But there was about 10 minutes at the end of your seminar where you started telling a story. And I have referenced many times how that story completely changed my perspective on training jiu-jitsu. And I really would argue that it is the reason that I am at the level that I am at now. But the story was about Hodger winning the open classes of the world. So you know what I'm referencing. And so I would just love if we could start off with that story, in your conversation with Hodger.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And the topic that you're talking about is basically how to train with people that you like. There's always this debate, like I gotta have world champions to train with to win world championships, and it's and the point of the story that I'll get to is no, you don't. You don't at all. As long as you understand training inside and out. And he had an epic run in 2009 when he won. He just submitted it. He just destroyed everybody. And everybody was, kind of, I commentated his matches and later on I found it fitting, or found it just amusing and fascinating, that he told me that his best guys at the time were purple belts. I know that Braulio and he had some from time to time, but they lived kind of far away at the time. And I was always fascinated by what he said it was the way that he trained. He got to do the same things over and over and over and over. And basically what you saw was what he was doing over and over and over. He perfected his cross choke and he perfected his mount through that whole entire time. And I thought it was so cool because I had back when I started, it was like battle royale. I mean, we broke holes in Hensel's walls, and it was survival of the fittest. And we just trained, and we trained a lot. But then I think my first real entree onto like this basic training mentality, I went to Brazil, and I don't know if I told this story as well because they're just so related. Probably ran out of time, but. I was a blue belt down in Brazil. There was a very good guy named Roleta, and he was a world champion. And I was watching him train just because I knew who he was. Very famous at the time, super talented, an athlete. And I saw this purple belt just arm locking him, like arm lock, and then they would be rolling again, and then arm lock, and rolling again, and the same arm lock. I'm like. And I was talking to Luca Atala was sitting next to me, and I said, holy crap, who is this guy? And he's like, no, just keep watching. And so I was watching, and then sort of progressively, now this happened pretty quickly, but progressively that arm lock failed. And then it failed again, and then Roleta got out and then finished the guy. And he's like, no, he's going to be fighting Margarita. or potentially fighting this guy named Margarita, who I knew as well at the time, was very, very good. And Margarita does this arm lock. So Holeta just is training how to get out of the arm lock. And it really then sort of boom, some real bells went off in my head at that time. It's not all about hard, crazy training. It's about experimentation and learning. And once you get that and you start taking that up the ranks, then I feel like your game can just go boom, it can just accelerate so fast. And in Hodger's case, here's a guy that's world-class, world champion. How do you get better than that? How do you go from, winning a world to finishing everyone with almost the exact same move? And I think it's just a real nice case in point where you develop your skill sets and you take away some of your attributes, and then you're left with only your skill and your timing. And if you can do the same thing systematically to those individuals without using a lot of your attributes, then it just lets your skill set get so much better. And I always love that story, because when I hear, I was a victim of that too. I actually, when I was a black belt, I went to the Worlds. I fought Gabriel in the Powell. That was my first black belt match I ever had in the open class. And I was a little bit disappointed in myself. I fought a great fight. Henzo actually came up to me and told me that was his best fight he's ever seen me fight. I lost, and I really beat myself up. I just said, hey man, I'm not being able to train with Ghee, with the guys that I need to train with. But as I reflected later, I thought, well, that's just nonsense. As I got to calm down, I was like, well, that's nonsense. I'm training with the best guys in the world. And then to learn more that, more importantly, that how Hodger trained, I didn't really have that far of a grasp back then. Even though I knew how to train, I didn't have that statement was a big statement that he made. And I didn't really have that type of power, I guess, in my training. But then I reflected later and I was like, oh yeah, the match after me, I did quite well with him. I didn't do well with him. I guess he's a big human being. And he beat me by a lot of points and was about ready to squeeze my head off when the time expired. But then the next match, he beat Comprito 12-2. He mounted, he was winning 12-2, mounted him and finished him. Comprito was the returning absolute champ. So I didn't even know that though. I didn't know that. I just went in the locker room. And then I found that after. Like, oh well, you know what? Maybe I wasn't doing so bad in there. But it's really made my training change as well, especially as I get older. I believe that that's the way older individuals should train, because it keeps you healthy, as well as obviously young world champions should be able to train with whoever's in the room. You should be that if they're even halfway talented or skilled, you can get great training with anyone.
So when in the sense of rolling without your attributes, do you find that it is harder for some people to comprehend that than others, or to execute that than others?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it takes practice. That's a learned skill. I mean, to take away what makes you successful, you're really peeling back the layers. And it doesn't necessarily need to be peeling back the layers, but I believe that it is. It's a hard pill to swallow when you're beating up people right on a regular basis, but you're only using your A game. You're like, hey, let's shake hands, and I've got a blue belt or a purple belt, and you take them down and you pass their guard, and then you beat them, and you do it again and again and again. And there's some merit to training like that, but it shouldn't be very often. And I think to let yourself, I guess it's not letting yourself, but allowing yourself to be exposed. Because when you take away your power and your speed and you're left with timing and weight, you're exposed and you're going to get beat up by guys that you're not used to getting beat up by. I think that is absolutely difficult. It is not natural for, I think, us as humans, even though some people do it naturally. I think it's a thing where you see it all the time. It takes practice. Because if I tell my students, hey, take away your attributes, and what generically what I find the first step is they try, and then it's loose and sloppy. It doesn't look like their normal form.
Mhm.
And it takes some practice to make sure that you're not like all of a sudden just doing things incorrectly because you're not using speed or strength, and everything looks the same, but you're just using timing. You've got to slow everything down.
So when it comes to losing, I think, especially in competition, you see so often people have the opposite mentality. Usually, people will blame losses on one of two things. They'll usually try three things. We'll say three. First, of course, is the ref. You lose because of the ref. The second one, I think, is, well, I'm just not. I don't have the right training partners around me. But the third one, I always find, and I almost find that this, maybe the ref one is the most common, but maybe this is second, is people say, well, I need to train harder. I need to go harder because it was the speed of competition that made me lose. What would you say to a student, let's say a purple belt, that is in that mode of they just lost, maybe it was a really close match even, and well, I don't go hard enough in training. What would you say to someone in that situation?
I mean, obviously we'd have to look at their training specifically. It's tough to generalize a person's training without seeing what they're doing. But what I could say is that hard training should be like, Josh, when we're talking about hard training, we're like, man, you got to do those rounds, and you got to kill or be killed in the ring. I think that's should be a minimum of your training. There is you need to do that. But if you do that every day, day in, day out, you're not going to have a long career. You're going to be injured. You're going to be banged up, and you're not going to be ready and primed for competition, which in competition, you should roll around and be healthy. You should be as healthy as you can be without accidents in the training hall. I would simply say that those are excuses to an individual. But you've definitely hit the most common three. And they all say the one thing. And man, I've been guilty of those things. They all say one thing, is that you have to take responsibility for yourself. And the only person that's at fault is yourself. That's because you have the power to change that. When you say something that puts responsibility on somebody else, that's a very weak statement. You need to reflect upon how you're training, not only how you're training, but what you're training. I mean, if you've got, like for me, I came up, there were world-class guys all around doing great things. So it's kind of tough to say like, I need good training. No, actually all of these guys are champions here. So I don't have to train with those guys to be intelligent and train and get the most out of what I'm doing. But I think it would be a simple statement just to really reflect on why they thought that way, get to the bottom of why they thought that way, analyze what happened in the particular match or that type of competition, and then start breaking it down as a coach. I think coach and athlete need a very, very healthy relationship to be able to reflect on tape, but not and have them also reflect, not just go, it was this fault. No, I think as an athlete, you need to say what happened and why did that happen, and let me solve these problems so that on the next competition, let me see what's going on and make it. I like to say competitions are feedback. If you're competing and you're really into competing, you should do it a ton. Because that's the best feedback that you can have for what your goal set is. And so then you get time to analyze what happened, have feedback, go back to the training hall, fix up those things, and then come back out and test it again.
That is really good. Can I actually just pause this for 10 seconds? I need to let my dog in. I just forgot. I realized I forgot.
No worries.
Sorry about that. Forgot the poor guy.
No worries, man. You suck as a dad too. Yeah.
So just on the same or kind of moving on with you talked about like the coach and athlete relationship. What about someone? So like I have Chris Paynes on a lot. Do you know who Chris Paynes is at all?
I don't know. I mean, the name sounds familiar.
So yeah, he is very really good teacher, but he's in England, and
Oh
he
yeah. Okay. Yes.
basically came up not having a coach.
Right.
Learned self-taught jujitsu almost.
Yes.
So if someone is in that situation and does not have the ability to have that same coach-student relationship that they or coach-athlete relationship, this person wants to be a competitor, or even the scenario is they are a blue or purple belt and nobody at their gym wants to compete. Their coach really doesn't push it. Their coach doesn't understand competition. What would be somebody's recommendation if they're trying to be a competitor, a good jiu-jitsu athlete, and they don't have that coach that is directly over them? They just don't have access to it.
I would say then they're going to have to be an exceptionally good self-motivator, and to make sure that they understand what their goals are and don't let that stuff pass you by. Because the great thing about a great coach is a great coach. If say you tell me, Shawn, I want to win the worlds. Well then, buddy, you're going to be training like a world champion. You're going to be held to that standard and that type of responsibility. And so I've had some students here in Nashville express that kind of interest, and it's met with that. It's met with, well, okay, then if you're gonna, that's what the commitment level that you're going to commit to, then you're going to commit to everything that goes into that level, because it's really easy to say, I want to be a world champion, but then not back it up. So I would say if it's just you and you don't really have a coach, you better be exceptional at discipline, at understanding what makes a professional athlete, and what more specifically, what makes a jiu-jitsu or mixed martial arts professional athlete tick, and the training that goes into what that would what would bring those results, the techniques that would bring those results, and then embark on that journey and that road. I do think, like, could you do it without a coach? Yeah, if you have that type of drive and self-motivation, yeah, you could probably get really far without one. Do I think that need to have mentors? Yeah. Do they need to be in your back door on the academy every day? No, probably not. This isn't the NFL where where there's a million people vying for one spot.
Mhm.
This is jujitsu still. We are still a very small speck, a grain of sand on a beach compared to like the massive professional levels where there's millions and millions and millions of dollars at stake. So yeah, you can get far. I think that self-motivated, self-guided people that have a real good head on their shoulders, that understand what it is, what it takes to be that person, could get to that level if they're willing to travel. Because I'll tell you, one thing is to see the techniques that are done in competition and then go learn them from the people that are doing them has some real merit. But you could go travel, train with that person, those individuals, pick up that technique, pick up those skills, and then go back and start implementing. I think that there have been some people, I'm sure there have been some people that have made it to the world-class level doing this.
That makes really good sense. So, just on a different note of kind of student and coach relationship. So, the time you started jujitsu in 1996,
6.
I was 2. In case you're wondering, I was 2. But you started in 96. You dropped everything to move to New York and train at Henzo Gracie's.
Yeah.
During that time, how long before you left New York?
I left in 2005.
Okay. And so during that time, from 96 to 2005, there were some great coaches training, current coaches now, obviously great competitors too.
Right.
But I kind of wanted to focus on the coach thought.
Yeah.
So arguably some of the best coaches in the world were training then with you and Danaher, and there's a lot of Matt Serra. There's there's so many phenomenal coaches, that come out of this. So my question on that is, just in your opinion, do you feel like that came from the right people being there at the right time, or did that come from the environment that Henzo created, or did that come just directly from how Henzo taught and how Henzo trained? In your opinion, what kind of, if any, one thing kind of was responsible for that?
Yeah, I think it came from a blend of everything you just mentioned. I think it was a great time to be there. And then we were led by a great human being that knew how to coach and how to teach. And then you had that blend of all of these guys being as serious as we all were together. And I think that made sort of a perfect storm of things, and really brewed this big family of people that, now these guys have coaches. The coaches are have champions amongst themselves, and it's really, if you connected the dots and you looked at who Henzo made and all the coaches that came from there, and then you spread it out, it would be probably pretty crazy how many champions came from that one guy when it's all spread out. It would be insane, I think.
And not just in jiu-jitsu, correct? This is MMA champions and
MMA, Ghee, no Ghee, the whole 9 yards. It would be pretty insane. So I think it came from the top down, and then just all of those other things were just elements of a perfect storm. Yeah.
That makes really good sense. Do you, in looking back on that time, was there ever a time since then that you progressed as quickly at jiu-jitsu or became better, or was once it kind of built up, were you able to continue to push farther and get better?
I don't know. I just did it as much as I humanly could. I mean, I literally put everything off to the side. I went to college, but my whole entire schedule was around jiu-jitsu. I took out student loans to pay for jiu-jitsu. Like, I was a maniac. And so I was on the mat, and this is when people ask me like, hey, what's the fastest way to get good? Well, the fastest way to get good is have a great leadership, and then be on the mats for as many hours as your life will allow. For me, I just made it. That's what I did. I mean, I was really on the mats from, like, in the beginning, 5-6 hours a day. And that was after 3 months of starting. Then that was my schedule. It was like 5 to 6 hours a day of training every single day, except for Sundays. And then even then, once I got even halfway skilled, then Sundays became training. And then it went at the end of my blue belt. I was at the academy. I tell this all the time. I was there from 7 a.m. till about 11 p.m. every single day. With, of course, some days in between, but barely, even when I was injured, one of my big things about coming back from an injury is, like, keep your schedule. Well, my schedule was tough. I was at the school all day. So when I had my injuries, guess where I was? I was at the school all day. And so there's no secret, how to progress fast. It's to do it a lot. I mean, obviously, coaching and your intelligence on the mat and reflection, all these things have to do with the speed of what you get good. But I guess back then that was kind of fast. I got my black belt in 5 years, a little over 5 years, I guess. And there was probably at least a year of time where I was injured, where I couldn't even train. Wasn't even able to train. I had a broken jaw for almost 5 months. I got bit by a poisonous spider that kept me out for like 4.5 months. A couple of other injuries, but that was all before black belt. And so, I think at the time that was considered pretty fast, but I don't think it was fast because I spent hours. I mean, if it was like the normal person training twice a week, you'd probably say, well, it took you 20 years in that language to get your black belt. So maybe people could have even done it faster with the same amount of hours that I put in. But I think that's the key. The key is just to do it as much as you humanly can without corrupting the rest of your life, and then be happy with that progress.
What did training look like for you in those times where you were training all day?
Yeah, I mean, I even bought so I did sports my entire life. So it's just something that, I just take to. I really love physical nature of things. I love it. And then I like to really think about it as well. And so literally I would have I bought a weight system for my apartment when I first moved there, I lived in Staten Island, which is about an hour, 20 minutes away. So it's like a standard day was to get up in the morning, lift weights, then jump rope while I was watching tape. So I'd lift and eat breakfast or jump rope while I was watching tape. I would study tape for about an hour a day, and then I would be off to morning class, and then I'd go to class, and not jiu-jitsu morning class because we didn't have it at the time, but college. I'd go in to my 8 a.m. class, get done, make sure I was back at the gym at the academy by noon for our noon class, train from noon to about 2:30 or 3. Then go back up to college. And for a little while I was wrestling. I'd wrestle. And so then I would have for a year and a half, I did 4 p.m. was wrestling practice. So I'd do my classes, then go to wrestling practice from 4 to 6, and then go back down to the academy to get there about 6:30. I was a little late. There would be a 6 p.m. class. I'd get there at 6 and I'd leave at 10. And then I started a 7 in the morning class when I was just a purple belt, and I have Silver Fox to thank for that one. Thanks Silver Fox, because you that's a sarcasm, Josh. Like, you made me get up in New York City. When you get up at 5 in the morning and you're out in the cold, it's not necessarily the most enjoyable time. But yeah, and then at that point I would train. I would do my class and train. Then I would go lift weights and train some more. I would always try to do my weight training at night, but it didn't always happen like that. But it was just a full-time schedule. Everything else was second fiddle. Work was second, then I started teaching privates, but personal training, I did that. I bartended. I did whatever I needed to do to afford training.
And so, it's kind of the science of trade-offs, right? And people don't maybe recognize that. I feel like maybe even in the last 20 years, 25 years, trade-offs become less and less popular because I think we've always wanted to have our cake and eat it too. You've wanted to make 6 figures and train full time and not have to do anything to do that, right? And we've always wanted to do that, but sometimes you do simply have to sacrifice some so you can get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Would you, looking back, if you had the knowledge that you had, but not the technique, okay, the knowledge of training and how to train, and you got put in the same exact situation, would you have done anything differently?
That's a tough one. Probably would have trained smarter from the beginning. Although I feel like I was pretty lucky in that I learned that pretty quickly, compared to like some people maybe don't learn it until they're into their black belt phase. Maybe they just didn't have that, and they're just brawling, and then
Some
they can't
people never
brawl
learn
anymore.
it.
Yeah. And so I might have tried to go that route just a bit sooner, but I still feel very lucky that I got there as soon as I learned that as soon as I did. I think there's always things that you change, but overall, I mean, I'm very happy with the journey that I've had. I just, I love what I've, all the people that I've met and the skill sets that I have. So I don't think I would have changed anything about that per se. I probably would have looked at competition a little differently back then than I did. I didn't look at it as feedback. I didn't look at it that way at all. Actually didn't motivate me at all to compete. One of the things I say to people that make goals is you have to be careful how you define your goal. And one of my goals was simply to be the best jiu-jitsu guy I could be. I wanted to be one of the best on the planet. And what we had at Renzo's was a system of world champions coming through all the time. And we gotta see what firsthand, and I'm saying we, like all of, John and myself and the guys that we were training with, we kind of got to see firsthand how we performed versus world champions when there was no pressure. There was just technique versus technique. We're training and you're trying your techniques and I'm trying mine. And we got to see this kind of feedback on a regular basis. And so I felt pretty happy with my progression based on those things. And so for me, competition really wasn't a thing of testing myself. I didn't view it as a test back then. I viewed it as I competed because everybody was competing and I liked sports. So I think I would have looked at that a little differently back then. As I would have viewed it more as a way of feedback, and then if I had the goals of being best in the world, I might have looked at competitions as like, well, that's the way that you could define yourself as best in the world. I honestly never had any motivation for competing to win medals. I just didn't care about medals. I just cared about how is my technique working? And in the training hall and in the academy, I got to test it on a regular basis, and it worked just fine. So for me, that was like a fulfillment for me. And so maybe not that competition is that important to me, but I think I probably would have viewed that a little bit different. Maybe I would have been able to segment like, hey, okay, let's do these different that's why I'm so strongly say competition is a feedback. It's a mechanism of feedback. Training has a mechanism of feedback as well, but they're just different mechanisms of feedback. And so you can easily put those things in different columns in your career if that's what's important to you.
That makes okay. So I want to put a pin in watching tape, and we'll continue on with what we're on, but we'll go back to just tape watching in a second.
Yeah.
But you said you are using competition, or you should use competition is kind of a way to see where you're at, and see what you should be working, and a way to test things. But then you also said that you were getting to train with world-class guys, and it was technique versus technique. And so just if you could dig a little deeper on what competition is, in a sense that it's obviously not just technique versus technique. What are the other players in competition from your view?
Yeah, so there are many, and I think it's an individualized thing because some people look at competition differently than others. And I think competition is something that if you want to do it, then by all means you should do it. But it can mean many things to many people. Like one of my very good friends, Matt Serra, his goal was win the UFC world title, and he did it. And then I think, like I said, you have to be careful how you define your goals. He became a world champion. And at that point, I think that was it. That was like, for him, that was like, man, I did this. Like I did it. And I think that all of a sudden you've done it. So, if I often wonder if things sometimes go, hey, not only do I want to be a world champion, because if you get, you have to obviously have the ability to make it to that level. If you make it to that level, then is it maybe perhaps you need to reevaluate your goals and say, you know what, I don't only want to be a world champion. I want to be a 10-time world champion. I want to be the best. And some people have that and some people don't. I mean, that's all relative speaking. That's a personal thing with inside yourself. But if you have that ability and that's what sets well with you, great. But if you want more than that, well, define it, make it your statement and go for more. And I believe that way you can achieve the best version of yourself and not just like, hey, wow, I achieved this goal. And then, so set them super high, and then they say the one thing about this, the goal setting, they say, what is it? Shoot for the stars and you're sure to land on the moon. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of those things, right? Anyway, I think competition can mean different things for different people, but there's obviously, there could be a set of stress and anxiety that sets in. That could be different for everybody. Because sometimes competition isn't stressful, it's a rush. I think some people just define what is stressful, others define as that was a freaking rush, man.
Uh-huh.
Like it was, it's a different thing for different people. It could be a big fear for someone and fun for someone else. And if it's a fear for you, then by all means, I believe that that's even more motivation to go head on and confront that, because I think it makes you a better person when you confront those fears. But there are all of those other factors, right? There's technique. There's the pressure that you put on yourself to, if you do put pressure on winning and losing, what that means to you. That's why I think that's why I say it's a good feedback mechanism, because feedback, you can change. Winning and losing, you can't change. It's not in your control. Like there's nothing about winning and losing that you can control. if you're the better guy that day or better gal that day, it's your day. Then winning is going to line up because you focused on what you needed to focus on that particular moment. But it doesn't mean that you're always going to win. You might lose. It is out of your control. It's what's in your control is yourself and your technical abilities and what you're focused on, your tactics and your strategy. Because those are the other big things in tournaments. Like technique is a tactic, strategy is huge, especially if you know your opponent. And in tournaments, we also oftentimes we don't know who it's going to be. So tournaments are a little bit of a different. They're like a wild card, right? It's sort of like you may know everybody, especially when you get to the black belt level. You may know everyone that's in that bracket, but you don't know if you're going to face everybody in that bracket, and you may never face that guy. You may never face that guy before. So tournaments throw some different monkey wrenches into play than just a single match where you can really divide. Like, hey, this is the strategy that we're going to use to beat this guy, and that can be a whole different animal.
As a let's say as a competitor, if you are looking at a tournament setting where you can't, you get 3 days before, IBJJF tells you 2 or 3 days before who you're going to be fighting.
Yeah.
So you'll know at least your first round, but then you can only speculate on your next few. How much is strategy just as important? Are you trying to kind of know everyone in your division and every scenario that might play out? How much focus are you giving to the individual and not the individual that you're fighting and not just yourself?
I believe strategy really has a big role in the realm of your own strengths. So instead of focused on what someone else is doing, you could be focused on how you're going to get to your strengths from everywhere. And that way you can develop a generalized strategy for whatever the game might be. It's getting it back to where you are in your wheelhouse, so to speak. Because then again, the focus is on you. It's not on what the person is doing. It's on what you are doing and what you are prepared to do. Something I sort of missed or ran over on the competition, I believe, is that, and especially in any type of competition, I believe that there's a sort of a pyramid of what you need to be prepared with, the physical preparation, and then the strategy, and then the tactics all makes a sort of a pyramid in order of importance. And so I feel that strategy is one of those things that, like I said, as an individual, if you're fighting me, you may know my game so that you can say, hey, I'm going to do my strong suits, and I'm just going to be prepared that if he does one or two things, I know how to get back to my strong suits if it's getting carried away. But other than that, I'm a big fan of knowing what your strengths are, constantly working on your strengths, and making sure that you can get there from everywhere. And then I feel like your system will be small, but the world that you can get to your system is big.
Mm-hmm. That makes really good sense. That was an excellent answer, Shawn. That was good. Not that they all haven't been, but that was really good. So on that, we're talking about researching opponents. Let's talk about watching tape. I guess let me take a step back. Maybe there are people that will argue that Shawn Williams is the best coach in the world, right? So there are going to be people that are going to try to argue that. Yes. And you've made it, right? And so then there's always going to be people that can disagree, right?
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
if somebody argues that Shawn Williams is the best jiu-jitsu commentator in the world, I don't know if you can disagree with that. I don't. Anytime I watch any jiu-jitsu event that you are commentating on, I really feel like the actual narration of what is happening is 10 times better than anyone else because you understand positions really well. I assume that this comes from how you view jiu-jitsu and how you watch tape. And so that was kind of something I really was important to me to touch on with you is when you were going to watch tape, first, how do you choose what you were going to watch?
Now, but thank you for the kind words, Josh. If it's for commentary, tournaments are an arduous task. I would say that for a tournament, it is probably on average, I would say if it's a black belt pans, let's say, or a black belt world championships, every weight class, I've got to study every single weight class, men and women, and I've got to study every single person that I can find tape on in every weight class. So it generally takes me about, that's why when I chef, the sooner they release who's in it, the better, always the more happy that I am. It takes me weeks to prepare for those things. Now, some of the people that I've already seen many things before, so that's easy. I know what they want to do. I know their game. Of course, people evolve all the time. But what I look for when I'm studying in general are habits, because habitual movements are movements that have been ingrained in people, even if they don't even know it. They just do certain things. They've done them so many times that they become habits. And this is when you'll see an athlete do or react to the same situation with basically they do the exact same thing or close to it, match after match after match after match after match after match. And whether they're successful or not, because sometimes, you watch the defensive aspect of the reaction that people have to see how they handle things. And then you watch their offensive skill sets of what they have. And I always say, when you're watching offense or defense or whoever it is, you watch the setup, the execution, and the finish. And some of the best things to see are when people fail things on the upper level. So if you have two upper level guys and you've got two A and B, and you've never really seen either one of them, but they're world class, you've maybe seen a little footage. If you have A trying something on B and failing all the time, then that's something that A is doing. He's obviously good at. He may just not be good enough to do it to person B over here. So then you could take person's A behavior and go look at other matches to find when they properly execute the same thing that they're trying on person B, and especially if they're really adamant about going after that. And then you've got a whole you're going down a rabbit hole of things, and then you'll find where they do it successfully over and over and over and over and over. It just may not be that they can do it at the highest level to the, it's like a Hadra. But that doesn't mean that's not worthy of study. But when I study people, the number one thing, if I'm watching for competition, is I study habits. So habitual behavior. And I study the technique beforehand, the setup. I study the execution, and I study the finish, however they finished the technique. And so then you can get predictive behavior. If you know people's habits, then you can start to predict what they're going to be able to do. That's how, when I'm commentating, that's why I can tell you what guys are going to do, because they've done it many, it's their habits. And so then you really start catching on to this notion of here's what they can do. And then there's obviously a depth of knowledge that knows what's available on that specific technique. And that's systems. Systems are small, like I was saying. They're very small sets of movement that are boiled down to have only a few different responses. So say you're in a straight arm lock, you get a mounted juji and the person falls back. Well, there's only so many things that you're going to do on that. It's at the end of the tree. You've narrowed it down to the trunk. There's only a couple branches left. So then I try to educate the population of like, hey, here's what this person could do. Here's what I think they're going to do, because they've done it many times before. And so that's kind of general prep, how I do it generally. When I'm studying tape to better myself and just like watch what's going on in the competition world, I especially if it's a newer guy, I don't know their habits yet. So I might see somebody do something that I'm like, hey, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting technique. Let me go and watch them and see how many times they do it in the past. Then I'll find if it's a habit, a habitual movement, how much success they've had at it, and then see, is it worthy or not? Is it really worthy of any type of study? And then of course it has to appease to what I believe is strong jiu-jitsu and et cetera, et cetera. But the world-class guys are probably doing some strong jiu-jitsu. So it's that argument seems to be put at rest pretty easy if you're watching world-class guys. And so then it just goes down that, then I go down to that. And then I have this thing that you study from the head to the toe or the toe to the head. And because everything that we do in jiu-jitsu has some sort of impact on the human body. And, you know, your foot might be in a specific spot for a reason. And if we miss those things, then you might miss the detail that's actually making the technique work, because a lot of times technique will work, but it's not working because of what you're necessarily, the gross movement. You know, people, white belts, like, and I don't mean it disrespectful to you white belts out there, a white belt can look the same as a world-class black belt if you say that a technique goes from point A to point B and human movement travels along this line of A to B. Well, anyone can look the same if they have some decent experience in an arm lock. We'll just pick on an arm lock. So you're doing a mounted arm lock. If you drill the mounted arm lock and it looks the same as Hodger doing his mounted arm lock, you would go, wow, that guy looks the same. He must have a great arm lock. But we all know, you know, as you do it over and over and over, there are little nuances that make that arm lock really work and really shine. And it's not the gross movement that you're going to find those in. It's the little things. It might be the angle of somebody's knee, because maybe they're back heeling on the head better than what you would. It might be the angle of their foot. Their foot might be flexed up versus pointed. Their knees, the angle of their knees might be different. The way that they hold the arm might be different. When they hold the arm a specific way might be different. All these things are worthy that you need to look from toe to head or head to toe. You need to cover that when you're studying tape over and over and over and over. And then you should be very successful at breaking down techniques and understanding how they work.
So now you have a technique. How are you going to implement that into your game, into your training?
That's a great question. I once heard Henzo, I think, was saying that, you know, the best way to start a technique is to just do it and start it at the levels that you can apply it or close to get some sort of application for that move, even if it's not quite right. So then I always would take it into the training hall and I would try it on people, those with lesser experience, and in that setting, because, you know, obviously every position has an experience factor, and you want to take the technique that you're trying and use it on those that have lesser experience in that setting, and get it to work, and then sort of feel how it's working, and then start taking it up the ladder and feel where you need to change things, how you need to change things, the timing, the setup of how you might need to change it, until it starts working consistently on the higher levels. So I just build it up. And then, you know, and I use that same mentality of taking out the attributes, because I feel like if you've got to muscle a technique with someone lesser experienced than you, if it really takes a lot of oomph, then something's not quite right. You know, something is definitely not quite right. And you need to fix that before you start going up the ladder and up the, you know, going on blue, purple, brown. And I use belts lightly. I'm a believer that experience outshines belts. So for instance, you know, you could have a black belt arm lock, but a blue belt heel hook. But you could be a black belt in general. Like, so I believe that experience outweighs the belt in all of these scenarios. So that's what I mean by experience level in that setting.
That makes really good sense. What do you think? What do you think about like deadpan drilling, meaning like drilling on a lifeless human being?
I think that's good to learn the A and B. So, you know, if you're going from point A to point B, that's really the first part of any technique that needs to come about is just this raw destination of sorts, getting your body to move to where it needs to be from start to finish in sort of a clunky way, and then a less clunky way, and then starting to make it sharper and sharper. But then again, that's probably it for a grappling dummy, so to speak. That's it, because you really can't get the feel. You need the feel. Now, I will say that when you're watching tape, brings about a really interesting topic. There is a look that, and almost a rhythm that successful people use on their techniques. And that's something that you need to emulate as well. So there's always a, I don't know, I guess you could call it a rhythm, but there's a look to a technique, Josh, and so you want to emulate that look as well, because there's a reason why that technique looks the way that it does when the highest level guys do it. And so you also want to have that same look, and to do that on a dummy is difficult. I think they're great to learn to A to B, but then when you want to start putting in all the little tiny nuances and how people respond, you have to have, it's a good idea to have somebody to drill on.
Mm-hmm. And have resistance with,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
And so so do you drill like on, whether a dummy or someone who's just not resisting? Do you do that at all?
Very rarely at this point. So what I define as drilling is anything in a controlled environment. So I believe that once you've learned A to B, and so there is that time. If I see something new, I'm absolutely going to go, hey, let me try this and figure out where my arms need to be and how it sets in, and then let's drill this a few times, get A to B and a little bit of the nuances, and then I take it on the training floor and then go to those with lesser experience, because I believe that that's actually drilling. So for you, if you are more experienced than that person in that scenario, you're controlling the environment. So inherently you're drilling. I call it an active drilling, because you can do the same thing over and over and over. And this brings us back to Hodger. He's mounting on these guys over and over and over and cross-choking them over and over and over. Well, that's just drilling. To him, it's drilling. To the guy on the bottom, they're fighting for their life. That's training. That's like raw training. But for the individual that can control the setting, that is drilling at its highest levels. And so I feel like to me, that's how I like to drill. It's a little more fun, of course, but there is merit in like, hey, let's do this over and over and over. But then again, if you do it over and over and over, you have to be very disciplined that it doesn't get loose, it doesn't get sloppy, it doesn't get sort of watered down, so to speak.
How much technique would you say, like, now that you add to your jujitsu, that is, so you watch someone do and say, I'm going to try that, or that you get through just the feeling of, oh, what was that I just did in this round? Is there an amount that you get more from one or the other?
That's a great question, buddy. I would have to say that it comes both ways. I don't know that, because I play a lot in training. I have my systems that I like to do, but I'm always trying to expand on those systems if that's possible. So I play a lot, and so then through, like what you're saying, through feel. And through just experimentation, you can find some crafty stuff, and then you have to take it up and see if it's going to be, if it's going to work, if it's going to have merit. And then there are those times that you see guys at the highest levels do things, and then you go and take them to the training hall. I don't know at this point in my life in jiu-jitsu, I can't really say if there's one that happens more than the other, to be honest. I would say experimentation probably happens a little bit more, but I would say it's pretty close. I mean, because now at the point I'm at, I look for little things, little setups, little things that people are doing different. And how can I, now for my students, you have to play with everything. As a coach, you have to be good at everything. For my little systems that I like to really make sure they're buttoned down, so to speak. It's just little tiny things at the moment.
Okay, that makes so. When you are training, how do you know that a technique is good? Do you just feel that, like, okay, we've gotten to this point where I've tried it on some really good guys and it is working? Or what is kind of your criteria on this technique? Is, let's say, this technique is good enough for you to teach at a seminar?
Yeah, I would say one of two factors. Either I've done it on world-class guys, or it's been done on a competition in world-class guys. I think for me, that's my sort of criteria. It's got to work at the world-class level for me to say, yep, I like that technique. I love that technique. I'm going to teach it. And it's either, so, for me, I'm lucky if I I've got really good friends that are all at high levels, and they've got students at high levels, and so we can have feedback through competition, even if it's through coaching and athletes that go out and compete. That's one way. So through competition, and your athletes can provide you feedback, like, did that work? Is that better? Is it, how can we make this better? And I think that's always the coach's best, that how that athlete can really bring something back to the coach is to try what you're working on and bring feedback. Did that work? It did. Awesome. Okay. How can we make it better? Did that work? Nope. Failed miserably. Okay. Well, we need to go back to the drawing board and look at some things. But for me right now, as personally, I either needs to have, I need to have used it on a world-class guy, or my students use it at a high level, or my buddies, their students, or their guys have used it at a high level, and then I learn it from them.
Okay, that's good. That's to just shift our, I think there is rhythm, like you were saying in jiu-jitsu, there's rhythm in podcasting to, and you know what really kills rhythm in podcasting is having to get up and go let your dog out. But to just shift our rhythm just a little bit, we talked the whole, the last 57 minutes on training in jiu-jitsu and getting better at jiu-jitsu. But now we'll talk about the second most important part of jiu-jitsu, what you're wearing, right? And so you've got on your Carbine t-shirt right now. What made you decide to start a jiu-jitsu Ghee Rashguard shorts apparel company?
It's always been sort of like one of my things that I liked back in the day. There was just very few good quality no gi stuff. And so there were nice gis. There's always been fairly nice gis. I mean, when I started, there wasn't that many. I mean, you had to get it from Brazil if you were lucky. And then, that kind of exploded. But there was really all the no-gi stuff, because we did so much no-gi. I mean, we would just wear t-shirts and surf shorts and anything that you could wear. And it was always baggy and hanging off. And then, at least Under Armour started to make some good stuff for Nike. And then everybody started wearing some of that stuff. But then the shorts were always atrocious. Mm-hmm. And so back in 2006, it just was like talking. I taught a guy that made apparel for BCBG. He made a bunch of accessory pieces. So he had a huge manufacturing thing. And I just had mentioned, I'm like, man, I wish someone would make some good shorts for one. And he was like, you want to make some? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, I can make you some. I said, yeah, I'd love to make some. And so then he brought his pattern maker in, and we designed a pair of shorts. And actually, I thought that they were the best shorts I've ever had on for grappling. But it was just sort of, I was busy with schools, but I had this short just sitting there, and it was the first time, I think it was the first type of short like that ever made. It was, it's like what we wear now. As a matter of fact, it was what Carbine shorts are patterned. Our first one was patterned off of. Now we've got more patterns now that we've got, and we've really started tailoring a lot of our gear towards making it better and better. But it was just the sheer fact that I couldn't stand the clothes for jiu-jitsu that were out there for no gi. And it was just sort of a fun project that I've done, and we're still doing, and it's starting to gain some momentum. And so I'm having fun with it, and now we're really starting to up the ante and have some fun with it. And I guess it's as much work as I want to make out of it. I've got a good team. That we have here. My partner is really good. And we're just starting to get into it now. And I think it's something that this year, moving forward in just the next few months, we're going to start really putting out some stuff and changing the game. And I have some big visions for it. And I haven't really, to be really honest, I haven't quite decided if those visions will come true, because they're big. I mean, they're like, I can't really talk about what the biggest vision is, but it's like game changing on apparel front. It would be game changing in the entire world, not just like on the apparel front. So, but that's a big undertaking. And right now I'm focused on growing Nashville, and I'm just focused on getting the best fit apparel that we can make at the highest quality right now. And so far we've had some really great feedback. I mean, our rash guard, we have 3 fits of our rash guard. And right now we just go with this one because I'm a dad. So we go on with like one that kind of fits dad bods, you know, it's tight in the shoulders and the chest. So you feel like Hercules, but it's sort of looser in the midsection.
I like that, man.
You know,
I'm into that.
Yeah, it's not like we have a compression fit that we haven't even released yet. And then we have like a bigger fit that we haven't released either, just because we've had such good feedback on the fit of our gear. And now this next one, we're releasing a slightly shorter short, and it's, you know, it's got no Velcro. We're just starting to really have some more fun and take off and see what we can get into.
That's fun. That is super fun. I like the dad bod Rashguard.
Yeah.
I have I don't even remember what brand it was, but somebody sent me a Rashguard. It was the first one that was like lighter on the stomach, and I was like, ooh, I can dig that. You know, usually I wear my t-shirts with like a large body and medium sleeves, you know, man. And so same thing.
That's it. So that's why I made that. I'm like, I want a rash guard that doesn't fit so skin tight. And so we developed a pattern that like really worked. And I was like, this is really comfortable. It's good. We're getting great feedback from it. And we're moving forward. We have our first women's cut coming in now. So I'm excited about that. So that'll be a little bit different, fit women a little bit differently, which I'm excited about. And then we'll just see how far we go. Carbine, I don't know if you know what it is. It was actually found on a meteorite. So it's a substance that came, you know, since we now know that there are aliens or whatever's going on, I don't have any idea. But how fitting that we have a substance that came from outer space. And that's where the name carbine came from. It's actually the hardest substance known to man right now that we can reproduce.
All right, sweet. Yeah. I like that. It took an hour and 3 minutes for us to go to aliens, you know, which is like, hey, you know, I feel like that's pretty good. I feel like, you know, we didn't start out at the top with it, you know, and we could have, we might have, should have, honestly, but
it's a topic these days.
It is. And then on, if that is at carbine.com, is that?
It's carbineindustries.com.
Industries. Okay.
You can go check that out. We're going to have a bunch of new stuff dropping probably in the next 2 to 3 months. We should have a bunch of new stuff dropping, some really exciting designs and coming your way.
All right. Excellent. I will make sure to link that for you guys listening in the description. And on the last note, the last thing I just wanted to touch on was you are getting to a point where you are starting to share more online. Was that a pandemic thing? Was that what kind of caused you to start to do that?
I always had that idea. So one of the things I actually set out to build an online site back in 2012, I believe, and it just sort of fell on its face. Back then it was very expensive and to get something working, and we had a web company that they just couldn't make it happen the way that I wanted to do it. But it's always been, I've forgotten a lot of stuff, man. and I always said, I've said since about that time, back in actually 2006, I wanted to do privates where people could send me video at questions and I would send them videos back. I've always had sort of a plan of recording everything that I know, more so that it's there and I don't have to remember it anymore. It's because a lot of stuff I don't use. If my systems are small and I believe they're very efficient and I love those things, but like I like to be creative and I try things at the highest levels. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I have used in the past on high level guys that works. But it's just not really my thing. And so I just kind of goes by the wayside. And so I've always wanted to put every single thing I know on video, so that it's a reference for everyone. And also more importantly, it's a reference for, you know, my son now, he's 3. And I've always had that where, well, back then I was like, well, when I have children, I want them to know, I want them to have a reference guide, whether I'm their coach or whether they have a different coach or not, at least they have a reference guide of, you know, what Papa, what he knows, what's in his brain before the brain goes. And so it's always been a goal, always. And now it's just like, I think I was very, very busy in LA with an academy. It was a very big academy. And now I've sort of retargeted what I really want to focus on. And I've got some time to now start putting it out there and helping the world get educated with jiu-jitsu, because I think it's the right time.
That's really cool. Do you what do you see that it's Shawn Williams BJJ.tv, correct?
Correct. Yes.
What do you see that kind of becoming? Do you see that becoming something that a lot of people are subscribed to, or that, you know, is more for you personally to be able to keep all these things? What's kind of your thought?
You know, I hope both. I have actually two things that are really going to be coming around right now. I'm in the process of filming a couple more instructionals. And then I'm going to experiment with doing something a little bit different, you know, really taking people from A to B, but getting my feet wet with them as well. And giving that a try for our community. So that'll be an exciting little experiment to see how that goes. But there'll be a lot of instructionals coming out very soon. I've got a couple more with Fanatics, and I'm also shooting one tomorrow about how to beat up the Kimura. I feel like I have a very, very good anti-Kimura game, and so I go into filming on that tomorrow, and hopefully that'll be ready relatively soon on that site. And then, you know, for me, I'm building something for my students here. That's an online resource for a subscription type of thing where you can sort of see what I do and how I do it. Sort of an online academy. So there'll be a couple different ways for people to learn. I feel like that's important. I don't feel like everybody learns the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people learn with instructionals really well. Some people learn with a little bit more programmed state of mind. And so one will be more programmed in nature, and one will be like, hey man, here's the goods, go for it. And so, cause you know, then it allows people to choose how they want to learn.
Okay, that's really cool. I like that. And so, before we get to the finishing question, so you feel that jiu-jitsu's training method is not maybe what it could be? Would you agree with that?
I agree with that in a good amount of cases. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was just that's always what we talk about on the show. That's why I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, that is something that I think will be really interesting to see in the years to come, is how people start to teach it differently and to learn it differently. Because if you looked at what learning jiu-jitsu was in 1996, would you say that it is different than it is in 2021?
Absolutely.
What would be the biggest difference?
I think the programming, you know, like technique has evolved for sure, but you can say, hey, this is technique A, this is technique B, this is technique C, but putting them all together in a very systemized approach, I think that's become much better now. And then just as we grow as a community, you have access to higher level coaching. I mean, back in 96, UFC was barely a thing. And so professional fighting wasn't really, besides boxing, of course, wasn't the way to go about a systemized approach to prepare yourself for that. Really wasn't there, just wasn't there. And now, I mean, geez, you know, we've got, this is a normal now. We've got guys competing all the time. We've got professional fighters competing all the time. The best training methods from all sports are now available to us as coaches. And I think we get to play around with them now and see, you know, what works for these sports, and how can we prepare athletes for these type of endeavors. And then, because it's different, it's not a basketball game, but we certainly can use core coaching principles and core preparation principles from different sports to drive the athletes of jiu-jitsu for sure.
That is excellent. That is excellent. So we always finish with the same question on the show. So the thought process, the scenario is this: I am at a Shawn Williams seminar. We're doing question and answer. I'm a blue belt. And I raise my hand and I say, Shawn, I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
You don't, and you just die as a blue belt. No, I think one of the biggest things is take responsibility for your training. You have to take responsibility for your training, and because technical questions are always going to be around, take responsibility for your training. Make sure you're consistently training at whatever it fits in your life, and then reflect on training when you're done with training. Like it's very common, I think, that people go to the academy, they train for an hour, and then they go home and it's done. They've washed their hands of it until it's the next session. And that is not how you suck less at jiu-jitsu. That's how you keep sucking at jiu-jitsu. And it's a very long road. And I think that if you take what you did at the training hall and reflect on it after, that's the real key to progression. Even training 1-2 times a week, your game is going to progress. Whether it's just problem solving, thinking about the things that you could have done in training, what happened, how can I solve that? Or if it's just reflecting and taking notes of what you did and making sure that it's in your brain, so that you can self-teach yourself. I call self-teach yourself, but sort of self-realize what it is that you just learned.
What would you say to somebody? Okay, maybe no, I'm still the same purple belt in the scenario, or the same blue belt in the scenario. Okay, so I have trouble remembering what happened in rounds. So it's hard for me to like reflect on that.
Yeah. What
would you say to somebody in that? Like, would there be a way to help them with that?
I would say practice, though. It's practice. It's about, it's not, I don't believe it's easy to reflect in the moment if your focus is not on technique. If your focus is on winning, you get caught up in what's going on in the round, because winning becomes more important than doing the technique right. And so then the focus is not quite right. So then remembering, right, that's like asking somebody, sometimes you hear, man, I don't even remember what happened in a fight. And that's generally a case of stress. The focus is, they're just caught up in reacting and going, like they've already done all their training. Now it's just blah, go. Mm-hmm. Training is not that way. It's not, because you do it so many times. It's not like a fight where you go in and you're just constantly reacting. Training, you have the time to focus on technique and actually try the technique as it should be applied. And so then I feel like if people focus on the right things during training, it's easier to remember what happened during those rounds and actually start with a couple questions. And I always reflected immediately after training. I would, on my commute back home or whatever it is, I believe you must do it fairly quickly. It can't be like tomorrow, because then you're going to be like, there was a million other things that happened after training, so now it's out. And so immediately after training, you should reflect, just bring a couple questions. What happened? So number one, what happened in your rounds that caused you trouble? Did you get finished in an arm lock? Okay. So then how did you get finished in an arm lock? Where from? What were you doing? Et cetera, and start to be specific, get specific in the breakdown of your problems that you might've had. And then you can start creating or finding answers, rather than just going, was my session good? I did better with Josh. What the hell does that mean? You know what I mean? What does that mean? I did better. I didn't get submitted today. That guy is not specific. That's like, oh, I did better with, I did better with Shawn today. He only submitted me twice. That's not problem solving. That's just like, because how do you know if I was going crazy on you that day? That's that typical, like, you can never judge your trainings by how well you performed against your training partner, because you don't know if they're bringing it that day. You have no idea. It could be that they're playing around and they're just playing. And so you have to look at the technique. What are the problems that came about? How can I fix it technically? And then, hey, now you have some real reflection.
That is a really good answer. Shawn, thank you for being on the podcast. Is there anything you want to say to finish?
Hey, it's a real pleasure, Josh. I appreciate it. And go to my site, and the easiest way to get to what I've got going on is just join my newsletter. There's a couple of free things on there. If you want to get on there, fine. If not, join the newsletter. And I'm on there every week, putting out content now every single week. And I'm going to do so as I drop some of the instructionals. It'll all be on there. So that would be awesome.
All right. That is excellent. Thank you again. I will link everything in our description. So if you guys want to follow up with Shawn, you will have the ability to do so. Thanks again, Shawn.
Hey, dude. Pleasure, Josh. Thanks so much, buddy.
And that is the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Both of the things that I talk about with Shawn at the end are in your description, being Carbine Industries and his online site, Shawn Williams, BJJ.tv. And so we reference both of those. They're in the description. You guys should check them out. You can sign up for Shawn's emailing list. I actually just did after recording. I didn't realize I'm like signed up for every jiu-jitsu emailing list because I have one of my own. It gives you a lot of inspiration. It also motivates you that people are doing it. For me, writing emails is like one of the hardest things in the world to do because there's not instant feedback like there is with jiu-jitsu, right? When I try a pass and it doesn't work, well, I know that didn't work. I know I need to tweak it. Maybe my timing was off or whatever. With an email, you send it out and then 3 days later you get a response that you wanted and you're like, oh, good, great. That's kind of a struggle, but just signed up for his emailing list. I can't tell you guys for sure how great it is because I haven't gotten any yet, but maybe it is great. We'll learn together. I'm sure it's really good if Shawn is doing it. But that is all I have for you guys today. I just wanted to make note. I haven't made note in a while on this episode or on the show. If you guys are enjoying the show, send me some feedback. You can send me an email at josh@simplifyingjujitsu or message me on Instagram at the Josh McKinney. That is also linked in the description below. And so you guys can check that out and let me know if you're enjoying the show or what parts of the show that you're enjoying, because we do two completely different things on the show where I have interviews and I have solo episodes. And it seems like people like the format of doing both. They get about the same amount of listens and I get about the same amount of feedback, unless I talk about something like shrimping. And then that gets way more feedback when I start to bash some traditional jiu-jitsu-ism. But that is all I have for you guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. I hope you guys check out Shawn and some of the cool projects he has. I hope that you guys give me some feedback on the show. Let me know if you're liking it, if you're hating it, if you're loving it, if you're indifferent. I would just like to hear. And most importantly, I hope that you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu.